Good morning. Good morning. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Give it about 1 minute and then we will get started. If you are watching, please say hello. Let me know. Hope everybody is doing well. Had a guest host yesterday. I had to be in Orlando yesterday, so hopefully you guys took some golden nuggets away from the training on Ad Profits Unlocked. And today we are talking numbers. And when we talk numbers, some people love it, some people hate it. But what I will tell you is the entrepreneurs that go from good to great are the ones that know their numbers in and out in their business. I used to tell myself that I wasn't good at math. And because of that story I was telling myself, I didn't track my numbers as well as I could. I think there's a couple of different buckets that school owners might be in. Like some school owners just they don't have the proper technology to be able to track properly. So maybe that's you. Another set of school owners just don't, know the numbers that they should be tracking, so they're not tracking anything. I think another bucket are school owners that are tracking some, but maybe not tracking the most important. And then you have the bucket of people that, on a weekly basis, they have time blocked into their schedule where they are going over the numbers. I have a finance time block every single Friday morning, 3 hours in the morning, where I dive into all of the recruiting stats, revenue stats, retention stats, so I can make data-driven decisions in my company. Good morning, Miss Efferson. Good morning, Miss Ross. Eyes on the road, ma'am. So today we're going to talk about mastering your metrics. And what I really want to do is help you unpack the most important numbers you need to be tracking in your school. So we're going to talk about the 3 C's of traffic stats, utilizing a scorecard, determining your marketing budget, and then highlighting your marketing expenses. So 2 of my favorite quotes on, kind of just like marketing and budgets. One's by Henry Ford, and he famously said, "Stopping advertising to save money is like stopping your watch to save time." You can stop your watch, but it ain't going to save any time. So we've got to make sure that we can confidently advertise in specific marketing strategies. And the only way you're going to be able to do that confidently is if you know your numbers. Another really great quote: "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I just don't know which half." And I feel like a lot of school owners feel that way. And it's just because they're not properly tracking their numbers. So the 3 C's of traffic stats, right? We, in Maya, we call it recruiting, revenue, and retention. When I've done consulting in the past, I call it traffic, tribe, and thrive. So there are statistics that we need to know under recruiting. There are statistics that we need to know under the retention aspect of keeping our students. And then there are statistics we need to know in terms of the revenue, right? There are different profit centers inside of our school. And you should know the percentage of revenue that's coming in from billing versus events versus retail versus down payments or paid in full versus trials. And the only way to do this is to have a means of tracking it properly. So when I say the 3 C's of traffic stats, there's a lot of different statistics that you can be tracking, but these are the 3 that you really want to keep top of mind. And that's your cost per lead, which I feel like if you are advertising, with like Facebook ads or Google ads, you might have a good understanding of what that number is, but you need to take it a step further and look at what your cost per appointment is and your cost of acquisition. If you know how much it costs you to get a new student, let's say it costs you $175 to get a new student. Well, now all you got to tell me is, well, how many new students do you want? And then we can create your marketing budget from that. But if you don't track these numbers and have these numbers, then you can't reverse engineer how much you should be spending. So cost per lead, pretty simple. Amount you spend on marketing divided by the number of leads you got, and that's going to give you a cost per lead. Now, you can track this through individual marketing sources. So you have a cost per lead for your Facebook, you have a cost per lead for Google, you have a cost per lead for maybe like mass enrollments that you're doing. But the struggle with that is that one, it's very time consuming and tedious, and the other thing is that it's hard to say who gets attribution because in today's world, being bombarded with just advertising in general, especially through social media, it can take multiple touch points for somebody to pull the trigger. So, maybe they went to the local pizza shop and you had a rack card in there. So they grab the rack card and, they see your website. So they go to your website and you have your Facebook pixel on there. So now they go to Facebook, they see the ad, they opt in. Now you have email nurture sequences, text message nurture sequences, and they finally pick up the phone and call. And then you ask them, like, how'd you find out about us? And because in order to get your phone number, the last place they had to do was go to Google. They tell you Google. And it's like, how do you give attribution to any of those? Because it took all of them in order to make the sale. So, once you're starting to scale and many locations, and we're starting to talk about millions and millions of dollars, I think getting a lot more granular. But for the majority of school owners, just taking the amount that you are spending on marketing and then dividing it by the number of leads you have will give you your cost per lead. So in these examples, $2,000 divided by 100 leads, I got $20 cost per lead. Good morning, Miss Jilly. Good morning, Miss Pickett. Nice to see you. If I spent $1,500 and I got 50 leads, that's a $30 cost per lead. If I spent $750 and I got 40 leads, that's an $18.75 cost per lead. Now, for those that are marketing online, the cost per lead in today's world is unfortunately higher than it was back in 2020 and then it was back in 2015. I mean, I remember when I first started advertising on Facebook, like I could get leads for like under $1. But what we have to remember is that these platforms has expanded. They have evolved. More people are on them. More businesses are advertising. And you have some really big businesses that are advertising on these platforms, pouring millions and millions and millions of dollars into it. So because of that, it is going to increase the cost per lead. And every market is going to be different, right? We have clients that get $5 to $10 cost per leads. We have clients that get 25 to 30. We have clients that get higher than that. So your market does play a role, but we want to at least make sure that we're tracking what the cost per lead is. Then we have the cost per appointment. And this is kind of like taking it to the next level. And that's just the amount you spent on marketing divided by the number of appointments you got, right? So just because you got 100 leads, that doesn't mean you got 100 appointments. So now we need to figure out like how much are we paying per appointment? So if you spent $2,000 in November and got 40 appointments, that means you're spending $50 for an appointment. If you spent $1,500 and you had 35 appointments, you're spending $43 for an appointment. If you spent $750 and you got 20 appointments, that means you're spending $37.50 cost per appointment. So we want to look at what the cost per lead is, and we want to look at what the cost per appointment is. And then arguably the most important number here is the cost of acquisition, which is CAC. And that's the amount you spent on marketing divided by the number of enrollments that you got. So if you spent $2,000 in November and got 20 new students, that means you have a $100 cost of acquisition. If you spent $1,500 and got 18 new students, you have an $83 cost of acquisition. If you spent $750 and got 10 new students, you got a $75 cost of acquisition. And when you know these numbers, and my recommendation going into 2025 is look at, your average cost of acquisition for the entire year of 2024. And, maybe it's $100, maybe it's $80, maybe it's $125. And then you want to look at, well, what are our enrollment goals, right? Are we maybe trying to increase by 10%, 15%, 20%? And however many more acquisitions or enrollments that you're looking to add, I'm just going to throw arbitrary numbers here. Let's say you signed up 100 new students in 2024, and in 2025, you want to be able to sign up 125. Well, then you're just going to take whatever your cost of acquisition dollar amount was and multiply it by the 125 new students that you want to obtain. And this will help you start to put together an actual marketing budget. So, those are the 3 C's of traffic stats that you absolutely need to know. And you also need a way of tracking all of this. So, the way that I recommend tracking this is with a good old fashioned spreadsheet. Some of the most successful people that I know in life kind of, really just rely on spreadsheets. And I have a key here in the beginning because there's 3 scorecards. There's a recruiting scorecard, there's a retention scorecard, and there's a revenue scorecard. And the key breaks down each one. So all of the columns for recruiting, the columns for retention, and the columns for revenue. And now you can track all of these different stats in one place. Okay. Now, this could get much, much, much more granular, but what I have found is simple scales, fancy fails. And if you are trying to track every single little number, more than likely you're just not going to be able to keep up with it because it's going to be too time intensive and too work intensive. So these are what I believe are, just kind of like the non-negotiable numbers that you should be tracking. So let's take a look at the recording scorecard. And the way that this is broken down, it's got all the different days of the month. We have number of leads that came in that day, number of appointments on the calendar, how many of those appointments actually showed, how many closed, what was the source? Like when we asked them, where was the first place you found out about us? Was it a referral? Was it Facebook? Was it Google? Was it a school event? Then we want to track the number of new appointments that were booked that day. I want to know, how many new appointments do we have? And the number that is in here is really going to show us the effort that the team is making in booking new appointments. Number of new trials that came in, number of renewals, number of upgrades, cancellations, walk-ins, active count, and revenue. And if you're not sure what some of these terms are, if you look on the key here, it will break down each one of these. Now, what's so great is that I told you, like, understanding those percentages of, your traffic stats. So earlier on one of the 12 days of Christmas training, we talked about, wanting to aim to book 50% of the leads into appointments and then having 70% show and then an 80% close. Well, there's a formula built into this spreadsheet. So as you add in, different amount of leads that come in each day, it'll tally it. And then as you also add in the number of appointments that you have on the calendar, it'll tell you the lead to appointment ratio. So right now, this is at 30%, and I'm just plugging in some random numbers, okay? And then based off of the numbers on the calendar, this will show you what the show rate was. So in this case, this was a 75% show rate. And then this will show you what the close rate was. So this will automatically populate the percentages for you as you fill this out. And it'll also add up all of the new appointments booked, trials, renewals, upgrades, cancellations, and walk-ins. So that's the recruiting scorecard. Very, very powerful. We also have a retention scorecard in here. And again, how to use this, we have a key that will show you how to do it. So active count, the number of active paying students, total enrollments for the year, total enrollments with perfect retention, meaning that nobody ever quit. And all you're going to do is plug in what those numbers are. So in this example, it'll ultimately spit out what your attrition is, which is your amount of churn, the percentage of people that you have lost. And it automatically does this for you. So you would just go through the key step by step. Whatever it's telling you to enter, you would enter, and it'll populate automatically with the formula of what your attrition rate is. The average in the martial arts industry is 5%. If you're above 5% churn, that should be a major focus for you going into the new year. 3% is like, man, you're doing really, really great. If you're at 3%, should you continue to ensure that, your retention stays strong? Of course, but you don't need to solve for a problem because you're not having a retention problem, okay? And you're just not going to know unless you are tracking this. And then finally, we have a revenue scorecard. And for this one, you have the days of the month across the top, and then you have the different profit centers that are in here. So, today is, let's say, the 17th. And at the end of the day, going in and being able to tally and say, okay, we sold 250 of retail. We had one upgrade to our elite program, and they ended up putting $299 down. We had a renewal; they ended up putting $199 down. We collected $350 for our holiday parent night out. We sold a package of 3 private lessons for $100. No mass intro today, and we received a paid in full for our basic program for $1,800. And then the billing check is the tuition that automatically comes in. So let's say for this day, we process $3,500 in tuition. Okay. And what this will do is it will automatically total it so that by the end of the month, you'll know like exactly how much money came in for retail. So maybe the next day is 150 and the next day is 200. This number automatically populates. And then what it'll do is it'll put in your total revenue. And then if you put in your active count at the end of the month, it'll also break down what your student value is. So let's say, by the end of the month, we were at $30,000 and we had 285. This would auto calculate for your student value. So again, this is what I would consider a simple scorecard. I think it's a great starting place. And if there are additional metrics you want to start, tracking, you can do this. But I think as like a bare minimum, this is a really, really great option. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on is this marketing calendar. So at GrowPro, we put together a marketing calendar, a marketing budget calculator, because I think a lot of schools just don't really know, like, man, how much should I be spending? Well, if you're tracking properly and you know the amount of leads and the appointments and the closes, and you can figure out what your cost of acquisition is. Well, once you know your cost of acquisition, then the question is, well, just how many more new students do I want in the next year? So you really have to be able to pull the data. But the SBA recommends a minimum of 10% of your revenue going to marketing. And it also depends on what phase you're in. If you are in like a hyper growth phase, then maybe you start considering spending 15% or maybe even 20%, just depending on where you're at. And again, if you're like, Chris, I don't even have 2% to put to marketing, well, then we just have to remember that we have to lean in more on the internal and external forms of marketing as opposed to digital. But with this marketing calendar, you could put in, let's say for January, you say, okay, January, is a big sign up month, especially for adults. And we want to go for, 20 new students. Then it's going to ask you what percentage of your leads do you expect to schedule an appointment? And again, if you're using something like this recruiting card and hey, 55% of my leads, schedule an appointment, then you have that data to input it. Then it's going to ask what percentage of those appointments do you expect to show up? Again, if we're looking at this scorecard, 75% expect to show up. And then what is your close percentage with new students? And if you're tracking this, and let's say in this case, it's 66%, let's say it's way below where it needs to be. And then if you know what your cost per lead is, let's say in this case, we get a $20 cost per lead, and then this is going to calculate and tell me, okay, if I want 20 new students based off of my historical data, then I need to spend $1,469. Okay. This calculator is free to anybody to use. I'll drop it in the comments for you guys to be able to grab, but it's just, if you know your numbers, which you should, it's a really great way just to calculate the estimated ad spend. Okay. The last thing I want to touch on is just understanding all of the different marketing expenses that we have, because it's not just digital, right? Yes, we have the ad spend, but maybe you're doing printing. Maybe you're doing every door direct mailers. Maybe you are sponsoring a PTA. Maybe, you're setting up booths somewhere, or even the supplies for the booths. One of the things that I really love using ChatGPT for is to analyze reports and data. So what you could do is you could pull your bank statements or your P&L and you can drop them in Chat GPT and say, here are our marketing expenses for Gracie Pack MMA for 2024. We enrolled X amount of students, say 150 new students in 2024 with this budget. We're trying to determine our marketing budget for 2025, and we're aiming for a 15% increase in overall growth. Please read through the document and provide a marketing budget for 2025 that will help us hit 15% growth. So this is just kind of a really cool way to have Chat GPT read through your P&L, which hopefully is categorized with your marketing expenses. If it's not, then you need to talk with whoever is your bookkeeper. But you should be separating, the different marketing expenses with ad spend and printing and all the different ways that you are marketing. And then Chat GPT, based off of whatever your goals are, maybe you're looking for 10% growth, 15%, 20% growth, can actually build an estimated budget for you. So really cool way to leverage AI and try and help you figure out, where is the majority of your expenses going to in terms of your marketing. Okay. So your action step is to finalize your budget for 2025. This should be part of an annual strategy that you implement into your school. I am a big proponent of budgets. I took Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. She's probably about 9 or 10 years ago now. And it really, really helped my wife and I get on the same page with finances. And I took a lot of those concepts and implemented them in my school, Gracie Pack at the time, and now also with GrowPro. And, with the budget, more than likely, if it's the first time you're doing it, it's not going to be exact. There's going to be a little bit of wiggle room, but at least you can now just know, okay, we have X amount of dollars laid out for advertising, marketing in 2025. And you could do the same thing, for equipment. Maybe there's equipment you need to purchase or technology that you need to purchase, and really just start thinking about all of the things you are going to need in 2025 and start building that budget out. And our giveaway today is the scorecard. And this scorecard that we walked through, I will drop the comments in the links for you guys. And like I said, whether you're using this scorecard or you're using some other scorecard, I don't care. I just want to make sure that you're using something to track these numbers. The last thing I want to say about statistics, and this is just important with how you set up your day for success. There are certain times during the day that your brain fires, and everybody's is different. That your brain kind of gets in a flow state, and there's a different type of kind of brain capacity that I need if I'm like creating content like social media posts or filming videos. Good morning, Miss Smith. Nice to see you. Versus like being in like an analytical mode where I'm, staring at spreadsheets. And that's why it's important to kind of know where your energy levels are, throughout the day so that you can build this in. Like at 3 p.m., I'm telling you, like, for me, that's kind of towards the end of the day. I'm not going to be staring at spreadsheets because my brain is going to be fried. For me, I like doing spreadsheets and numbers first thing in the morning because I feel like I'm at my sharpest during that time. So if you are going to time block this in as a part of your weekly ritual, and I mean, it should be part of your daily ritual if you are the one that's inputting these numbers. If you have program directors, and this is something that you should be delegating to them, and then you can look at those numbers on a daily basis. But Marcus Lemonis said it best: know your numbers and you know your business. So my challenge to you is going into 2025, gaining some clarity on, where you truly are at in your school, figuring out what percentage of improvement you want. At a minimum, I would aim for a 10% increase. If your business was a stock and you had, a 10% return, you'd probably be pretty happy with that, but that's the minimum you want. So really needing to think about, where we're at today, where we want to go, and then use the, KPIs that hopefully you have been tracking. And if you're not, in the future, you will, just to be able to make better data-driven decisions. Okay. All right, guys, that's it for day 9. We've got 3 more days, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I really appreciate those of you that have been hopping on live and those of you that are watching the replays. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.